The Middle East is witnessing one of the most volatile confrontations in decades as the conflict between Iran, the United States, and Israel continues to intensify. What began as coordinated American and Israeli strikes on Iranian targets at the end of February has rapidly expanded into a regional war, drawing in Gulf states, threatening global energy routes, and raising fears of a prolonged military confrontation. The current war began on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel launched surprise airstrikes on multiple locations across Iran, targeting military installations, strategic infrastructure, and senior leadership positions. The strikes marked one of the most dramatic escalations in Middle Eastern geopolitics in years. During the opening phase of the operation, Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in a targeted strike in Tehran, a development that profoundly shocked the region and triggered a powerful Iranian response. In the days that followed, Iran vowed retaliation and launched waves of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones against Israeli territory and U.S. military facilities across the Middle East. The confrontation has since expanded into multiple theaters, including Lebanon, the Gulf states, and parts of Iraq and Syria. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, commonly known as the IRG, has now claimed responsibility for a new series of missile and drone attacks targeting American military infrastructure in the Persian Gulf. According to Iranian military officials, naval forces of the IRG carried out strikes against U.S. fighter jet shelters and operational facilities located at Bahrain's Sheikh Issa Air Base and the United Arab Emirates Al Dhafra Air Base. Iranian authorities said the attacks were executed using high-explosive cruise missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles. They claim the strikes hit repair facilities, logistics centers, and support infrastructure used by American aircraft. According to the IRGC statement, the operation damaged areas responsible for maintenance and logistics and reduced the operational capacity of the Al Dhafra Air Base. Iranian officials also warned that the attacks are part of a continuing campaign and may not be the last strikes on those facilities. Tehran has declared that the attacks will continue until the bases are evacuated by American forces or rendered unusable. The conflict is already having far-reaching consequences across the Middle East as U.S. and Israeli forces continue to strike Iranian targets. Tehran's retaliatory operations have spread across the region. Missiles and drones have been launched toward Israel and toward U.S. military installations in several Gulf states, including Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Some of these attacks have caused direct damage, while others have resulted in debris falling from intercepted missiles. Several countries have reported casualties and damage to infrastructure. Casualty numbers continue to climb as the fighting intensifies. According to figures reported by officials and international media, at least 2,000 people have been killed across the Middle East since the war began. Iran has suffered the highest losses, with more than 1,300 people reported dead following the initial U.S.-Israeli attacks and subsequent fighting. Lebanon has reported at least 880 deaths linked to Israeli operations connected to the conflict, while Israel itself has reported casualties from Iranian missile strikes. American forces have also suffered losses during the fighting. U.S. officials say 13 American service members have been killed and roughly 200 wounded since the conflict began. Most of those injuries occurred during Iranian strikes on U.S. bases across the region. The Iranian retaliatory campaign has also affected several Gulf states that host U.S. military bases. In the United Arab Emirates, Iranian missiles and drones have struck targets connected to American operations, killing several people and injuring more than 100 others. The U.S. Defense Ministry has reported that air defenses intercepted numerous incoming projectiles, though some still cause casualties and damage. In Kuwait, Iranian strikes have targeted American and allied military installations as well. Air bases, airports, and port facilities have all experienced attempted drone or missile attacks since the beginning of the conflict. As these attacks spread, the conflict has created an atmosphere of extreme uncertainty across West Asia. Governments throughout the region have raised security alerts, closed airspace temporarily, and placed military forces on high readiness. Energy infrastructure, shipping lanes, and diplomatic facilities have also become potential targets as tensions escalate. Amid this backdrop, U.S. President Donald Trump has publicly reacted to Iran's decision to strike multiple countries across the region. During a press interaction, Trump acknowledged that the scope of Iran's retaliation surprised many observers and analysts. Donald Trump said, nobody. No. The greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit. The U.S. president explained that Iran's decision to strike Gulf countries, some of which have historically maintained economic or diplomatic relations with Tehran, caught many experts off guard. According to Trump, several of the countries targeted in Iran's retaliatory strikes had previously maintained relatively stable relations with Tehran. Yet, once the war began, those countries became targets due to the presence of American forces or infrastructure on their territory. Donald Trump said there was no expert that would say that was going to happen. Trump argued that the current conflict reflects long-standing tensions between Iran and the United States, tensions that have stretched back decades. He also defended his decision during his earlier presidency to withdraw from the international nuclear agreement with Iran, claiming the move prevented Tehran from developing nuclear weapons. Donald Trump said, if I didn't terminate Barack Hussein Obama's Iran nuclear deal, you would right now, Israel will be gone. Trump claimed that the termination of the nuclear deal forced Iran to abandon efforts to develop nuclear weapons and instead focus on expanding its missile arsenal. He also suggested that previous U.S. administrations had failed to take decisive action against Tehran, allowing the situation to escalate over many years. According to the president, the confrontation represents the culmination of decades of unresolved geopolitical rivalry between Iran and the United States. While political debates continue in Washington, the situation on the ground across the Middle East continues to deteriorate. Iranian forces have launched repeated waves of missiles and drones against Israeli territory and American bases. Israel has responded with heavy airstrikes against Iranian military infrastructure, while the United States has continued its own campaign targeting Iranian assets. The conflict has also spilled into Lebanon, where fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has intensified. Hezbollah, a powerful armed group backed by Iran, has launched rockets toward Israeli territory in response to Israeli operations in Lebanon and Iran. Israel has responded with strikes in Beirut and other parts of Lebanon. Meanwhile, Iran's military leadership has issued new warnings that the conflict could soon expand further. The IRC recently released a statement warning companies and workers linked to American interests across the Middle East to evacuate immediately from industrial facilities connected to U.S. businesses. According to the statement, industries and infrastructure associated with American companies could soon become targets in the next phase of Iran's retaliation. Iranian officials warned that civilians living near those facilities should leave the surrounding areas immediately to avoid potential casualties. The message from Tehran was blunt. Individuals working in industries connected to American interests should evacuate or risk being caught in the crossfire of upcoming strikes. The warning signals that Iran may be expanding its campaign beyond purely military targets to include economic infrastructure associated with the United States. Despite the escalating threats, Iranian officials insist that their actions are not directed at the countries hosting these facilities. Tehran maintains that it respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of its neighbors. However, Iranian leaders have also delivered a clear message to regional governments. Their territory must not be used as a launch platform for attacks against Iran. In practical terms, that means any country hosting American military installations could find itself drawn deeper into the conflict. For Gulf governments, the situation presents an increasingly difficult strategic dilemma. Many of these countries maintain strong security partnerships with the United States while also maintaining trade and economic ties with Iran. As the conflict intensifies, balancing those relationships is becoming increasingly challenging. Energy infrastructure across the region is also facing growing risks. The Persian Gulf is home to some of the world's most important oil and gas facilities, and disruptions there could have serious consequences for the global economy. Oil markets have already reacted to the rising tensions, with crude prices climbing as investors fear potential disruptions to shipping routes and energy supplies. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, is now under close watch by naval forces and international observers. If the conflict expands further, the strait could become a focal point of military confrontation. Diplomatic efforts aimed at preventing further escalation are ongoing, but so far they have produced limited results. Several international powers have called for restraint and urged both sides to pursue negotiations. However, the intensity of the fighting and the scale of the casualties have made de-escalation difficult. For now, the region remains on edge. Missiles continue to fly, air defenses remain active across multiple countries, and military forces remain on high alert. Iran has made clear that it intends to continue retaliatory strikes until what it calls aggression against the country comes to an end. The United States and Israel, meanwhile, have signaled that they will continue their campaign against Iranian military capabilities. As the confrontation deepens, the Middle East faces the possibility of a wider war, one that could reshape the geopolitical landscape of the region for years to come.